Well, hello everyone. In this video, I'm going to cover basic audio recording into Logic Pro, and I'll talk about how to set up your audio interface, how to set up your Logic project for recording audio, how to get a decent recording level into Logic, and how also to monitor or hear the signal you're recording. I'm going to be recording my voice with a mic using a Scarlett 2i2 audio interface, but I think most of the concepts I'm going to show you will work for any audio interface and any other type of recording method, such as direct in recording with a bass or a guitar, or recording instruments such as synth or keyboards. So this is the Scarlett 2i2 interface from Focusrite, and it's really great. It's easy to set up. It's fairly inexpensive. It sounds good. It has two mic/instrument inputs here. So in case you want to record two input sources at the same time, like acoustic guitar and vocal, or two vocals at a time, or a stereo recording, two mics set up to record like a group of vocalists or a group of even violinists or something like that. It also has a very convenient direct monitoring switch here, which is really cool, which I'll get into a little bit later. This uses a USB connection to the computer. It does not have a power adapter for itself. Some interfaces do. The Scarlett is USB powered. So if you're using a MacBook Pro or a laptop, make sure you have your computer's power adapter plugged in. And this audio interface I found does require maybe a bit more power than other USB powered devices like a mouse or an external hard drive. I had a couple other things plugged into my computer, and when I plugged in the Scarlett, the Mac OS gave me a message saying that it couldn't power all of the devices at once. So just be aware that I had to unplug my backup hard drive to get everything working. It's always safe to start by turning off your computer first and then plugging in your audio interface's USB cable to the computer and then turning on your computer. I even like to have all my mic and instrument cable connections made to the interface before I turn anything on. But these days, most things are plug and play, so you shouldn't have a problem plugging the audio interface into your computer after the computer is already on. So my computer is on, and I know I have power coming to the Scarlett because I'm seeing this little green light in the top right-hand corner. That means it's getting power from the USB cable from the computer. Next thing I'm going to do is go to my Applications folder, and let's scroll down here to the Utilities folder and open a little app called Audio Midi Setup. So if you're not seeing this audio devices window, you can go into the window menu and choose Show Audio Devices. What we want to make sure is that the computer, these are all our audio devices on the computer, we want to make sure that the computer is seeing the Scarlett, and we can see it over here on the left that it is seeing the audio interface. Over here on the right, this format is going to show me the sampling rate, which is basically the audio fidelity going in and out of the device. For right now, let's make sure both the input and the output say 44,100 hertz. Just want to go over one thing before we get started with the record process. If you're using a mic like we are today and you're recording in the same room as your main audio monitor speakers, which you might have in front of you at your music workstation area, you want to make sure that your volume for those is at 0 or turn the monitors off, or on this audio interface there's a main output volume knob for that. So just make sure you keep those off, and this will prevent feedback from happening where the microphone is picking up audio signal and then sending it out of the speakers, and then it goes back into the microphone and creates that horrible sound that we've all heard before. So monitor through headphones, and most audio interfaces will have a separate headphone output volume knob like this one does. And we're going to talk more in depth about the monitoring process in just a bit. So a couple best practices before you plug anything into your audio interface's inputs, especially a microphone cable. Number one is make sure your phantom power on your audio interface is off. It may say phantom power, it may say plus 48 or 48V. In this case, it says 48V on the Scarlett, and it's on right now, so it's pressed in, and that's why it's red. And I need it for this microphone that I'm using. The other thing you want to do is make sure your gain knobs are just off, or turn them all the way to the left or to 0 before you plug stuff in. I think that's always beneficial. And before you plug your microphone cable into here, or your instrument cable, whatever it is. Make sure it's the other end is plugged in this case, into the microphone first. So you can't see it here, but the microphone cable is plugged into the microphone, this blue one, and then plug it into the interface. I'm using input 1. And these jacks are multi-jacks. Sometimes on interfaces you'll have both an XLR jack separate from a 1/4-inch cable jack. In this case, the multi-jack handles both the XLR and the 1/4-inch. You can see in the center here, all in one. So just remember, with phantom power, the only time you're going to need to have it on is if you have a microphone that requires phantom power to work. So like I said, in this case, I have a condenser microphone, and most condensers need phantom power. But if you're using a dynamic microphone, such as a Shure SM57 or a 58 or a Shure SM7B, those will not need phantom power. So just turn it off. Turn off phantom power if you're not needing it. The other thing I want to show you on this interface, for each input is this little switch for either INST or line, and other interfaces may have something similar. So that's to select the input level if you're using a 1/4-inch cable for either your guitar, bass, or keyboards or something similar. So you'd switch it to line if you're recording, let's say, a synth, that's line level, and you would switch it to INST for instrument level. That would be your bass or guitar. If you're going directly from your bass and plugging the cable from there directly into the interface. All right, so let's now go into Logic. And for this demonstration, I'm going to be using Logic's empty project. So if you have a dialog box that looks like this, you can choose empty project, or you can also open up an empty project by going to File in the menu and choosing New. And just so you know, you can use really any song that you're working on, or the LCBC template. It will all work the same for this demonstration. Now Logic is going to prompt me to create a new track, and it already has audio by default, and that's what we want. So now I'm going to select Create. Now let's go to Logic's preferences and project settings and set them up for audio recording. So we'll go to Logic Pro 10 in the menu and choose Preferences. We'll go to Audio. And under the Devices tab, you should have Core Audio check enabled. And your output device and your input device should both say the same thing if you're using an audio interface. And they should say the name of the audio interface that you're using. In my case, it's the Scarlett. But if I need to change these, I can do that with a drop-down menu here. An in and out buffer size, we'll get to that in a minute. That's an important setting. Let's now go to the Recording tab. And just want to make sure that 24-bit recording is checked, and that we choose WAV as our recording file type. Now we want to go into Logic's project settings. And project settings are similar to preferences, except they're just for the project level. So each project can have its own set of project settings, and Logic's preferences are more at the global level. So any project you open up will have the same preferences for that project. So I can get to the project settings by clicking this little shortcut here, or I can go into the File and choose Project Settings that way. So let's go to Audio, and I want to make sure here under the General tab that in the sample rate that I have selected 44.1 kilohertz, which is the same sampling rate that I had for my audio device, my Scarlett, in the Audio Midi Setup application. For your sampling rate, you could also use 48 kilohertz. That's another industry standard that's used in video production pretty specifically, and also in other music production type things. And you probably want to have your Audio Midi Setup application settings in coherence with whatever your Logic sampling rate settings are. And the difference sound-wise between 44.1 kilohertz and 48 kilohertz is pretty indistinguishable for all practical purposes. But just so you know, if you're creating content for LCBC's Ableton loops for our weekend worship sets, we use 44.1 kilohertz in our audio files exclusively for that purpose. On the track that I'm going to record onto, I want to choose an input source, and we're going to do that in this part of the channel strip. So I already have mine set. I chose input 1, which corresponds to input 1 here on the Scarlett that I have my mic plugged into. And this is a mono track or a one-channel track and not a stereo track or a two-channel track that I'm recording onto. But I can record stereo if I wanted to, which would be for stereo keyboards, synth, or perhaps a digital guitar processor like a Helix, or perhaps a pair of microphones to record ambiance or a small group of singers or instruments. I can easily change this track into a stereo track by clicking here, and you can see the icon change to a stereo icon. And it's now showing me input 1 and 2 as the inputs. And also the meters down here just got a little bit wider, so it can show me 2 channels at a time. Now, if I was recording vocal and, say, acoustic guitar at the same time, I would not use a stereo track for this. I would set up 2 independent mono tracks for that purpose. Now I'm going to press the R button here on the track header, or I can also do that on the channel strip. And what that's going to do is going to record enable or record arm my track that I'm going to record onto. And this will allow me to see the audio signal level coming into Logic, and we'll see it represented here on the meter. Also, as I'm about to set the audio level going in, I want to make sure that my volume fader on my channel strip is set to 0, or what's called unity gain. And if you've moved the volume fader, you can easily get that back to unity gain by holding down Option and clicking on the volume fader. And that's just going to ensure that we have an accurate meter representation here of the signal level going into Logic. Now just remember, if you're going direct in from your guitar or bass, make sure you have instrument level selected for the interface input. On this interface, it's a switch here. And if you're recording keyboards or synth, that you have the input set to line level. And also make sure you have your volume turned up on those instruments' outputs to about what you would normally run them at. Let's talk about monitoring your signal or hearing back through your headphones or your monitor speakers what you are recording, so that, one, you can make sure that what you're sending into Logic is a good sound, and two, so that if you need to, you can follow along with the metronome or click track or pre-recorded tracks coming from Logic. There are 2 ways you can monitor, and the one is direct monitoring, and the other is through Logic, what Logic calls software monitoring. So the first way, direct monitoring, is the way I would recommend if you can do it, and this is where your input signal to the interface is routed directly to your headphones and your main monitor outputs and stays in that analog domain. Direct monitoring is going to give you the most immediate timing or the lowest latency, and some interfaces may not offer this, but it's really easy to do on the Scarlett. There's a switch here called Direct Monitor that you can just switch to on. And other interfaces that offer direct monitoring may allow you to do it through their own proprietary software application that you can install on your computer that will show you a virtual mixing console, and then you can mix the incoming signals to your headphones that way. You can, of course, also direct monitor if you have, say, an analog mixing board that you can send your input signals to and then monitor them before they reach your audio interface in your computer. Some mixers also work as like a 2-in-1, where the mixer is also an audio interface as well. They're like a combo. So you have a couple different options when it comes to direct monitoring. The other way you can monitor your signal is through Logic itself with what's called software monitoring. And you might have to do this because you don't have direct monitoring available. But one of the things that Logic monitoring, software monitoring does is it enables you to add insert effects to your signal in Logic as you are recording. So let's say you're recording a lead vocal part and you want to hear some reverb as you're recording your voice to give you that reverb space. And you can do that with this method. To set up Logic monitoring or software monitoring, let's go to our control bar display drop-down menu, and we'll select Customize Control Bar and Display. And let's make sure software monitoring is checked. And also let's check low latency mode. So checking these is going to make sure that we see these button options in the control bar for easy access. And if you're using one of the LCBC templates, these options are already there. So let's click on this icon button here to activate software monitoring. And the other thing you're going to need selected is something we've already done, which is press the R button in the channel strip to record and enable our track. Let's now go to Logic's in and out buffer settings. So we'll go Logic Pro 10 menu and Preferences and Audio. And here's our in and out buffer size. So as I said in one of our first videos, this is referred to as latency. This setting determines how quickly audio is routed through the computer and Logic Pro. And the reason that monitoring through Logic induces this latency or this lag or this timing delay with the sound is because it takes a bit of extra time for the interface and the computer to convert the signal from analog to digital and then apply any kind of processing to it in Logic that we may need to, and then convert that signal back to the analog domain to your headphones. So the smaller the number here, the more quickly this process happens, which is basically what we want, but the trade-off is that the smaller the in and out buffer size, it's going to require more processing power, more CPU from our computer to handle that lower buffer size. So if you're on a faster computer, or if you have few tracks in your project, or you're working with minimal plugins, and you're not using a lot of software instruments yet, or in our case, we're starting from scratch here, we're going to be able to run that buffer size at 32, 64, or 128, which is around the range we want to work at for Logic monitoring. Anything higher than that, you're going to most likely start to notice this delay, this lag of the sound as you're trying to record. So in the case of recording vocals, you'll sing into the mic, and then you'll hear what you've just sung in your headphones many milliseconds after you've sung it. It's going to sound really weird, and it's going to throw your singing off and throw your timing off, and that's something you're not going to want. If you are trying to record to an existing project with lots of tracks, plugins, and software instruments, you may try to record it at a lower buffer size, and you might find that Logic will all of a sudden stop the recording and give you a CPU overload error message. And if that happens, then you can turn on this low latency mode. And Logic then is going to disable plugins and bus routings that use a lot of processing power to allow you to record. Just be aware that when you do this, Logic will most likely turn off any effects, including reverb, that are on the track that you're trying to record onto. And also pre-recorded tracks will obviously now sound different. Most notably, the volume levels of your tracks will change and become quieter most likely. So just be aware of that. Okay, so now I can hear myself. So I've already set my gain, but we're going to get to that in a second. But I just wanted to show you how to monitor so you can be aware of that as you're setting your gain. But I have software monitoring pressed here. I have a low in and out buffer size chosen in my preferences. I also have the record enable button on for the track I'm recording to. I also have direct monitor off for my audio interface, so I don't have both the direct monitor sound clashing with the Logic software monitoring sound. You're going to hear that would be a bad clash. You don't want to have that. One other thing, there's a button here called input monitor. So as soon as I press play, that Logic monitoring or software monitoring will be disengaged. So if I need to practice along with something that's already pre-recorded in Logic, what I would do is I would turn input monitoring on, and that's going to allow me to practice without recording before I'm ready to record. Now we're ready to set our recording level by boosting the input gain on your audio interface and turning that gain knob to the right. So obviously I've gone through that process with the mic that I'm speaking into. As you're playing your instrument or speaking or singing, you want to be doing that at around the loudest volume that you would be recording at. So maybe that's singing or playing the loudest section of the song, which is possibly the chorus. So make sure too, if you're recording dialogue, that your speaker maintains a consistent distance from the mic. And for me right now, with this mic and in these surroundings, in this situation, I'm getting a decent sound at about 8 to 9 inches from the mic. In general, where I want to end up, where I want my recording level to be set to, is I want it to be peaking, which means our loudest signals, at between -18 and -12 on the Logic meter. So that's roughly between 1/2 and 2/3 of the way up the Logic meter. I can also see the most recent highest peak signal here in this box. And if I need to reset this to get a fresh readout, all I have to do is click on it. And now it's going to show me the highest signal from the moment I clicked on it. I don't want too low of a signal going into Logic, because then I could potentially hear audible noise or hiss from the noise floor on that track. But you especially don't want the audio signal going past 0 dB on the Logic meter here. It would also turn red here on the Scarlett input indicator when that happens. That's bad. That's going to cause noticeable distortion in the sound of your recording, and will basically destroy it. You'll have to re-record it. So let me just demonstrate. I'm going to turn down the volume for you so I don't blow your head off, but let me demonstrate what that would be like. Check, 1, 2, check. So it turns red here, and you get this orange on Logic's meter. That's a bad thing. Okay, so I'm so close to being able to record here. Lastly, I just want to check and make sure that I'm doing everything possible to get the best recording that I can. One of the things I've noticed as I've been making this video is that I'm sometimes causing plosives, that sound, into the mic as I'm looking over here at the interface and moving around a little bit. So maybe I can mitigate that by putting a pop screen between my mic and my mouth. That's going to allow me probably to get a little closer to the mic, which will also change the tone and make the sound more full and intimate and a little bit bassier. But I don't think I need to do that. All I want to do is just make sure that I'm off access on the mic, and you singers out there know what I'm talking about. I just want to aim my sound directly over the top of the mic capsule, which is going to, cut down on those plosives. So I want to make sure my room is quiet. I want to shut the door. It's crazy how often you can forget to do these simple things that are common sense, dealing with outside sound. So in my case, it's my kids. Many times I found that I have cars or trucks that go by. I hear those in my recording. So if you have the option to go deeper inside your office building or your house, or even, make your walls a little bit thicker, then you can do that, of course. Then there's the quality of the sound inside your recording space. I recently installed a quieter AC unit in here in my attic, which is quiet enough for mixing, but I'd still probably want to turn that off for recording with the microphone. I want to make sure I'm recording also in a room or a space that isn't echoey, like a small square size office room with drywall. Those are not so great. So put your Auralex on the walls in rooms like that, or really, any room is going to need maybe a little bit of treatment on the walls. You can put a bookcase, anything there to break up the sound, to diffuse the sound, or even absorb some of the frequencies, especially some of those high frequencies. That can be helpful. You might even want to try using a portable vocal booth, such as this here in the pick. That can also be mounted on a mic stand, and put your mic inside that. And guys, this is definitely not a recording technique video per se on how to mic instruments or choose the right mic, for your recording. There's so many variables to getting different types of sounds. You're probably just going to need to experiment with the gear and the rooms that you have at your disposal. The stuff I'm showing you here is really just the tip of the iceberg, but hopefully it can be helpful in getting a clean and decent recording using, in this case, a microphone, especially for you guys that are doing dialogue recordings of your baptism or your life stories at your church's campus. If I'm doing a dialogue recording, I'm pretty much ready to go here. I'm not going to wear headphones and monitor my signal for that, especially if I'm bringing someone from the outside that might not have a lot of voiceover experience. And like I was saying with baptism recordings at LCBC, I find I get the best take from someone, the most natural recording, when someone's not wearing headphones for that, but that's up to you to decide. But let's say I want to record an acoustic guitar track. It's going to be the very first track of my song. It's going to be the guide track, or the track that's going to show me the form of the song, that I then am going to use to add other instruments to later, vocals, drums, bass, and that sort of thing. I will need a tempo guide provided by Logic for that purpose. So let's put on the headphones. And if you're using one of LCBC templates, I've already gone over how that click track works, so you can use that. In Logic's empty project here, the click track, or the metronome, is in the control bar display. It's this icon. So I'm just going to click there. And then I want to get to its settings. I can control click on it and go to metronome settings. And these two sliders here, tone and volume, will allow me to adjust those things to get the metronome sound that I like. So I'm just going to press play and adjust those. kind of like the way it was set up. And now I can adjust the tempo to the tempo that I want to record at. This number up here that says 100, that's the current tempo. Let's say I wanted to go a little bit slower than that. I'm just going to double click on that and type in the tempo, the BPM that I want. Logic also has a count-in feature. So let's say for whatever reason I want to start recording right here at bar 7. But as an instrumentalist, as a singer, I want to hear a measure before that with the tempo so I can kind of hear the tempo and prepare for when bar 7 comes. So to turn on the count-in, I'm going to press this button. Now when I press record, it's going to give me that bar up front and then start recording at bar 7. As I said earlier in the video, one of the benefits of software monitoring in Logic is that you can apply effects to your signal to monitor as you record it. So let's go to our Insert Effects plugin slot here. We're going to click and hold and drag down until we get to the Logic menu. And let's go to Reverb, and let's go to Space Designer. And let's choose Mono to Stereo. Hello, check 1 2, check 1 2. So you can hear the reverb. And over here on the right side of the plugin window, you can see this wet slider. This is where I'm going to add or take away that reverb effect, and I can adjust this to taste. So all I'm going to do now is just add a little reverb, and I'm going to press R on the computer keyboard to record. This is where I'm going to sing my song and sound amazing. And press space bar to stop. Now I can listen back to that. This is where I'm going to sing my song and sound amazing. But the nice thing about this method is that over here on your channel strip or here on the plugin, I can turn the plugin off. This is where I'm going to sing my song and sound amazing. Now you can hear that the reverb effect is not on the track. So the reverb effect in this case is not printed or is not captured with the audio file itself. It's just sort of monitoring this, and this is great because it's going to give me some flexibility down the road as I'm mixing. You know, maybe I realize later on I don't really like this reverb, or I want to change the reverb or do something else with it. So I have the flexibility with this method. You probably noticed when I put on this Space D plugin that I chose mono to stereo, and the reason I did that is because I wanted to have that wide stereo reverb sound. And from this point on in the plugin chain, the channel becomes stereo. You can see the meter here as a stereo meter, having these two little green lines instead of one green line. But what's nice, again, is that we're not printing this effect. My audio file that I recorded is still a mono file, and we can see that here with this singular circle instead of the two interleaved circles, which would mean a stereo file. And if I take off this plugin here by choosing no plugin, everything on the channel goes back to being mono. Okay, it's time for me to go get some dinner, so I want to save this and then come back to it. So I want to go here, I'm just up into the File menu and choose Save As. I want to name my song and then save it to wherever I want to save it. And I organize my project as a folder. I like kind of doing it that way because it gives me the flexibility to go into the audio files folder and either borrow files from that if I need to. And I also want to copy the following files into my project, and I want to copy audio files and then choose Save. Thanks everyone for watching, and I hope this was helpful for you.